Welcome to Aircrew Interview. I'm Mike Young, your host. In this interview, we chat with former CH-46 Sea Knight pilot Hugh Brien. Hugh chats about what it was like to become a helicopter pilot, the role of the Sea Knight, and generally just shares some brilliant stories from his flying career. If you enjoy our videos and podcasts and would like to support the channel, you can do this by helping us out monthly at patreon.com/aircrew interview, which allows us to continue to create new content every month and grow as a channel. I also want to thank our sponsor, Laco Watches, who were one of the original companies to produce pilot watches for the Luftwaffe during World War II. They produce both A and B dial watches in different sizes to suit all tastes, which adopt the look of times gone by but still satisfied modern demands. You can check out all their models and products via www.laco.d. Thank you.
And the flying, though, we flew so many more hours. Like I was with a guy, a Marine captain who flew Harriers, and on my deployment, and he and I were comparing our logbooks, and we were both on our second deployments, and I was coming up on 1,000 hours in model, and he had maybe 350 hours. So yeah. Now that's time in the seat. Some of that time is like sitting on a ship, the deck of a ship. You're not literally flying, but we didn't discount that time. It would have been crazy, right? But you just had a really broad. You just flew everywhere. We would fly off the ship in the and go all over the place. I remember one time when we were coming back, we had a Marine fall during a fast roping exercise, and he broke his femur. He was badly injured. Ooh. And my boss at the time, Bill Personius, and I forget who, Dave Strassner, I think was on that maybe, but they had to fly to Bali to drop this guy off for a medevac. And when they got there, they unloaded the guy, and then the guy in the tower goes, "Oh, you don't have government approval to leave?" And he kind of did one of those where he's like, "Sorry, can't hear you. We're just going to depart to the south." Right. And they just,
yeah.
Like, what are they going to do? Send the Bali Air Force after us?
Yeah.
It's kind of, having that just mindset to go, how much trouble could I really get into?
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. So you had to think on your feet. But it was, I have to say, I did all of that by the time I was 25. Jesus. I mean, you think about,
Thinking what I was doing when I was 25 years old. Nothing like that. Certainly not.
I was 23 when I got to the fleet, and 24, 25, 26. I was responsible by the end of on my second deployment. I was an aircraft commander. I was assistant detachment OIC. I was responsible for this aircraft, all the people in it, all the stuff that carried in it. Sometimes people in the military don't appreciate what they've actually done when they go off into civilian world. I try to help vets when I can, kind of get them to realize what they have done and equating it into the civilian world. It's one of the things I kind of do on the side with some friends, and just if anyone needs help, I try to help them out with that. But yeah, your responsibility is crazy. 23 years old, I'm responsible for flying this $30 million aircraft and all this stuff in it. It's awesome. It's a great, looking back on it, you can see it makes me even excited talking about it. I remember the day I got my wings, I had a license plate just identical to this. Now, by the end of flight school, I no longer had my 300ZX because you couldn't afford it. No one could afford it. The insurance was way too much, so you traded in. I was driving a little Nissan Sentra, a little tiny four-door, like a Ford Focus, basically. Yeah. But I remember the day before winging, I went out and put one of those license plates on my car. This one here, I think you can see it here. And I had that on. I've had it on every car I've owned since.
I'll be doing the same.
Was driving.
Can you sum up what the best parts or the best characteristics of their 46 were, and any, let's share one memorable story, because I'm sure you have a million, but just one.
No, the coolest thing about the 46 that people don't realize is that it was very unique. So this aircraft has counter-rotating rotors, but what people don't realize is that in order to go forward, you actually increase the pitch on the aft rotor and decrease the pitch on the forward rotor. So it literally pushes like that, right?
Right.
And now when you turn them side to side, they go both rotors go, they tilt left to right. But one of the things they did in order to compensate for a really high, a rear high, kind of a nose low position is you also had a gizmo inside the helicopter that would trim the swash plates forward. And so the aircraft would come up underneath. So as you went forward, the rotors would actually, both of them would trim down, which is kind of a cool thing. The other interesting thing about the 46 was it was completely deployable into the field. You could operate it without a cart. So, for example, the starters were all hydraulic. Mm-hmm. And the way you would start it up in the field was you would go in the back and it had a hand crank and you would pump up an accumulator with pressure to start the APU. And that's how you would start the APU. So you'd pump up the accumulator, push the button in the front, and hopefully the APU would start, your auxiliary power unit. You'd flip that on and that would give you all your hydraulic and your electrical power. So it was kind of unique in that regard. There's not completely, but it made it kind of a little more easier to deal with in the field. So those were just two unique things about it. And then just having all that space in the back. We got up one Friday morning, me and my buddy Rob, we decided, earlier that week, we go, let's go on a training mission and we'll go to do instrument flying, but we'll fly to Vegas, but we'll go through Edwards. And so Edwards Air Force Base, which at the time, I don't know how we did that, but we called up and you had to get a thing called a PPR, I think is what it was called. And that was permission to land. Mm-hmm. And they gave us one out of the blue, like on a Friday morning. And so we flew up there and we went and landed right there at Edwards Air Force Base. And we saw a B-1 bomber. And we were like the only helicopter parked on this huge apron. But they came out, they gave us gas, kind of hung out there for a little while. There were all kinds of airplanes flying around. But the coolest thing is when you leave there and then we're heading over to Vegas, you see the 5-mile long runway out on the salt flats. But they also have a giant compass rose down there on the desert that you can see from space. And so that was really cool.
Very cool.
Let me just, I wrote this down because I wanted to mention it. So I was never, I could never have been an astronaut or anything like that, but I loved astronaut stuff when I was a kid. My dad met an astronaut at an executive training thing because he was a government guy. And he gave me this book, and it was all the Apollo missions to the moon. Well, it turns out in the summer of '89, I was waiting at Pensacola Naval Air Station at the terminal there, and John Young lands his T-38, the astronaut, right? Lands his T-38, jumps out, and he's in his blue flight suit. And I'm like, oh, that's the guy who walked on the moon. Right? Oh, and he also, he flew Gemini. He walked on the moon. Oh, and he flew the first space shuttle mission. Okay, yeah. I got to walk up to him. I said, Captain Young, I go, how you doing? I'm Ensign Brien. I just flight training. He goes, hey, man, how you doing? Good luck. He just walked by. Awesome. But it was really cool. So I met that guy. And then just a couple other things. I became a big fan of the Apollo program in the late 90s when Tom Hanks came out with that From the Earth to the Moon after the Apollo 13 movie. And so I got all these books. I started reading all the books about it. But then I met a guy named Frank Culbertson, who was an astronaut. Met him on a flight going to Denver, just on a whim. I had an iPad, I had my laptop out, and I had a 46 as my background. He goes, oh, you a naval aviator? I go, yeah. He goes, oh, I flew F-14s. And he started, when? He was like class of 71 from the Naval Academy, so he was obviously older. Mm-hmm. Then he goes, well, then he kind of just slipped this in. He goes, well, back on STS, blah, blah, blah. And he kind of threw it out there like nothing. I go, STS? Whoa. I go, are you an astronaut? He goes, yeah. He goes, as a matter of fact, I did the first night shuttle landing. What? And I was also the commanding officer of the ISS on 9/11. So they got to see all those pictures from the 9/11 tragedy. And he told me he had taken those pictures. Then there's an astronaut named Sunny Williams. I mean, I don't know her anymore, but we went through flight training together. She's got the most hours in space of all the female astronauts, and I think maybe all the astronauts now. Sunny, she was Academy class of 87 person, graduate. She's pretty nice. She flew 46s on the East Coast. And then I met a guy named Tom Jones. I was doing a refresher class over at the airport here locally, and there were like 25 people in the room, and they go, "Hey, introduce yourselves," and everyone went around the room. I go, "Hey, I'm Hugh, flew helicopters in the Navy," and this guy next to me goes, "I'm Tom Jones. I worked for NASA," and then I go. And I look at him, I go, he looked familiar, and I go, oh, he's so full of shit. So I walked up to him after, I go, dude, you're an astronaut, right? He goes, yeah, but just, I got a book. Then he goes, I got a book coming out. I go, why didn't you tell everybody?
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, you met some awesome people.
So, I like to learn about space. I watch there's a bunch of cool YouTube channels on the space program. Mm-hmm. Vintage Space, there's a gal who does all these great videos on vintage space. I also still like to fly airplanes, although I'm medically down right now for just some medication stuff. I got to get sorted. So that's a bummer. That's a big dent in my flying. But I like cars. I have a dragster in my garage, which is kind of cool. I have a Dodge Demon, which is really fast. And I have my kids, and I have a great life. I'm very blessed.
So, Hugh, what happened after your Navy flying career?
Yeah, so what happened is when I was at the end of my tour, the XO came in and said, you have to go. The executive officer of the squadron was the second in command. He would he kind of counsel you, tell you what you ought to do next. And he goes, because I wanted to go to Pensacola and be a flight instructor because I love flying. And he goes, negative, Ghost Rider. You're going to go to the Naval Postgraduate School and get a master's degree. And I was like, what? I go, wait a minute. I go, XO, I barely graduated college, and you're going to send me to graduate school, like where you have to do like calculus and physics and computer science stuff. And he goes, yep. I go, come on. So he goes, just go up there and visit the place. So I me and my buddy Rob again went on a cross country flight up to Monterey, and I visited the place. I go, this place is like magic land, right? It's Monterey, California. Pebble Beach is right there. You're literally on the ocean. I lived 2 blocks from the ocean. It's just a little bit cold. There's a lot of fog, and all you do is go to college. Like, you don't even wear a uniform. You literally wear a jacket and khakis, maybe a tie or a turtleneck, ride your bike to school every day, and that's all you do. And you get a master's degree, right? So at first I was like, I don't know. He goes, listen, Hugh, he goes, if you want a career, and at the time I wanted to be a career pilot or a naval officer, he goes, just get your master's degree. Every guy who's got command has a master's degree. Just do it. I was like, all right, he's sold. So I went up there for 2.5 years. You then have to pay back your time. And during that time, I had some family stuff happen. So just things changed. And I decided maybe I didn't want to be a career. Maybe I shouldn't go back to sea, whatever. I had little kids, just my ex-wife at the time, or my wife at the time was not real keen on it. So I made some career changes. But I ended up coming back to, after I graduated, I had a master's degree in information technology. I mean, in 1995, right? That's when the internet was taking off. Yep. So I spent 4 years in D.C. working at the Defense Information Systems Agency. And, being a junior officer in D.C., unless you got some pull or you got a guy, your career, I just didn't know how to manage that. So I ended up saying, you know what, I'll just get out. I got out in 99 and got into the software industry, and I've been doing that ever since. And it's been very, very good. It's done great. And if you put it on a scale, I didn't have to go to sea and I didn't have to go to war the second time when my kids were growing up. I mean, I would have, if someone called me up, I would have gladly gone, but I was out and I didn't. So I got to be with my kids and see them grow up. So, there's a balancing act there. As much as I hated all that to have happened, to get out of the Navy and not fly in the military anymore, you just got to look at where the upside is. Well, I have a great career and I see my kids, et cetera. So that's what happened. Now I've done a bunch of startups, and it's been great. It's really fun, and probably going to retire sometime soon. I don't know. We'll see. I don't know what I'd do if I did.
You've certainly had an amazing career, and I think everyone will be enviable of what you've done. But let's go into a personal side. There's a few questions for you. So apart from flying, let's say, or aviation. Do you have any hobbies?
Yeah, I like to I'm still kind of a computer nerd, so I'll do some hacking on my computer. I've been getting into cars as I get older, so I have a really cool Dodge Demon in my basement or in my garage,
Nice.
which is basically a dragster with a factory warranty. Now, I probably won't work on it, but I'm going to take it to the track hopefully this summer, maybe run it. But it's amazing. I go to Cars and Coffee here in Great Falls, Virginia. It's one of the premier kind of car meetups on the East Coast. And there are $1 million Ferraris that roll in there. Like, a Ferrari Daytona will pull in, or There's literally a row of 2911s. But it's cool. I'm the only Dodge Demon that pulls in there, right? with the horsepower of 840 horsepower and, dragster tires on it. So it's kind of fun. That is a hobby just because when you have a cool car like that, you instantly belong to a club, right? And that's kind of nice, right? It's like flying. Like you go down to the airport, you can just hang out at an airport and talk to people about flying all day. It's just you instantly belong to a club, which is really great.
Absolutely.
I also have 2 children. I've got 24 nieces and nephews that all live fairly close. I'm close with a lot of them, so they're fun to hang out with. And I like to shoot guns. I got lots of guns. We have a great shooting range near our house, and I've taken a couple of combat shooting classes, which is really, really an interesting kind of thing to learn. It's a tool. There's a lot of responsibility around it. You have to, so my son does that, and a bunch of my nephews, and so we go to the range. That's always fun. It's an interesting hobby to do. So that's about it. That's probably good. Probably everything I've been doing lately.
And the favorite aircraft or helicopter you've flown in your career?
Well, I gotta say the ride in that A4, I'll never forget. That was pretty cool. But there were, I guess there were so many aircraft I wish I could have flown, to be honest with you. But I like flying. Any airplane to me is meaningful. I like the idea of the art, if you will. I don't know if that's a thing, but the art of flying. Like, how do you just flying stick and rudder skills? That's why I don't think I could ever be an airline pilot. But if I could fly anything, boy, I don't know. I'd love to fly I'll tell you what I like to do. I'd like to fly that space shuttle Gulfstream simulator aircraft they would use to do the approaches. Oh. That Gulfstream, I think, was it G4 or G2?
Yeah.
NASA still had that, and had that retractable front gear.
Yeah.
And they would do those approaches. I would love to have done that once. But I think, the 46, because that's what I flew. I did fly an H3. I flew with actually, one last little quick story. There was an Army detachment at North Island when I was there, and there was a couple of warrant officers that were doing drug ops on the border. And so I met these guys in the bar, and I became friends with them. And the one guy goes, "Well, we fly single pilot." He goes, "You want to come fly with me one day?" And I was like, "Sure." So we get in this little, what it would have been, OH-58 Alpha, like an old one with not the 4-rotor one, the old 2-rotor, two blade. And we went out to the desert, and oh my God, it was 50 feet and below. Like the Navy didn't fly like that, but this Army guy, we were going up over mountains and just down the other side. So that was a cool experience. But I would have flown as many airplanes as they would have let me. But obviously the 46 was great to fly the mission that we did. It was really fun. But I wish I could fly more aircraft. It'd be awesome.
Well, Hugh, thank you very much for being on the show. It's been great to hear your story and, sharing a bit about your time on the Mighty 46. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. It was great. Thanks for doing this. I kind of sent you that email out of the blue, and I figured, what the hell? You do such a good job on these. I thought I'd love to participate. So thanks for having me on. It's been really fun.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Hugh.
All right. Cheers.